At the same time, the boy is the dad is the boy's first hero. They will always look up to it. One thing I realized, though, when my youngest boy followed me through in my rite of passage, he followed about a year or so behind me, he was 16 at the time. The end result was that I knew my job wasn't to turn him into a man. My job was to get him ready for it.
Welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast. This is the podcast for dads of all seasons to learn the things that they can do and engage so that they can go and equip the next generation for success. Here we sit down with everyday dads just like you to learn from their story, get inspired, and then start getting after it. So we invite you to join in, see what you can take away from this story, and apply to your life on your journey to becoming the Skilled Dad. Hey guys, and welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast. My name is Zach Reeser. I'm your host. And if this is your first time joining us, we want to say welcome. And if you're part of the tribe already, the group, the crew, whatever you want to name it, I haven't named it yet, I'm glad you're here again. And this is why we do this podcast. And I love when you all share stories of something you took away from somebody else's story, applied it, something you learned. And I'll just throw it out there. If you ever want to join me on this side, you're always welcome. You can go to skilldad.com and shoot me a note. Before I intro my guest, I want to be open and honest with all of you. So first timers, buckle up. Here we go. I'm a pretty open guy, but I've done a lot of different interviews on this podcast, met with a lot of people outside of it on this topic, and I rarely get nervous. Like maybe once that I can think of. I'm not that nervous of a person. I wasn't nervous when I talked to my guest today until about 45 seconds or so in. I did share this with him, but I wasn't nervous until about 45 seconds in, and he had mentioned that he's an international profiling and communication specialist. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And he's like, so that means I can look at you and get a pretty good idea of who you are. I've already gotten a lot of things. I can tell when you're telling the truth. I can tell when you're lying. And I was just like, oh. Now I'm a little nervous. I don't think I've lied in 45 seconds. I usually don't lie, but now is that lie a lie to myself? And it got wild, guys. And so after that, he started telling me about how he's worked with international organizations, very large multinationals, including Disney, Gillette, several other names that you've heard of, some of the local federal authorities in his part of the world, which currently is wintertime, and he's wearing a jacket and it's like 100 degrees here in Nashville. So I'm not sweating because I'm nervous now. I'm sweating because it's really hot where I am. And he's used those skills in the communications and the profiling under a lot of different projects. And now he's kind of moved a lot of that to also help business leaders, teachers, salespeople to take from him what he's learned on being able to read people so that you can then foster better relationships. So I'm hoping that also in this conversation, he can give us some tips on how we can read our children, those things that he said to me, and then use that for good to help them do the dishes. The other cool thing that Alan has done has started a international program called the Campfire. And this is an opportunity, and he'll talk more about it, I'm sure, but where people can come together from all walks of life around the campfire. And it may not be exactly what you think, but it creates a space for people to kind of gain that trust and then also share their story. Maybe in some cases, they haven't had a chance to do that yet. And this is kind of what I was thinking after we talked, is that in some ways we have a very similar mission and that we want people to be able to share their stories so that they can benefit others. And it just got me fired up, and I love talking to him. So Mr. Alan Stevens, I want to say thank you and for coming on, and welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast.
Thanks very much for the invitation. And by the way, thanks for scaring everybody about what I do.
Absolutely.
Everything I do is about building relationships. So looking at you, understanding you, to know where your skills are so I know how to work with you, how to talk to you, etc. It's about rebuilding relationships. Too many people are out there trying to con people. Too much work, too hard. Build a relationship with somebody and just let it naturally flow. That's what it's all about.
Yep. No, and I say that I said that in jest, but at the same time, there was a moment where it's like, when someone carries that power, and I've been in mostly the sales and marketing world and done a lot of trainings on teaching body language, not to your degree, and just a couple other, fun areas of my life where that was a key interest. When somebody's got something, I don't, okay, and I'm curious because you're the expert, but there's a natural tendency to almost try to lock up if somebody has some of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm the first. Have you seen that? I'm sure I'm not first.
I find that whenever anybody hears what it is that I do, they start to worry about what I'm actually looking for. When it comes down to it, everybody is suffered or insecure. Everybody wears a mask. Everybody pretends they're not wearing a mask. And we're all a combination of how we've decided to respond to all the events in our life. So that being the case, we're always wondering what other people think. When we shouldn't really be thinking, because while you're thinking about what are they thinking about me, they're doing the same thing about you. We're too busy focused on ourselves to really worry about anybody else. So it's something we shouldn't worry about. The only reason I do this is so that I can connect with you at a far better level, so I can build that relationship. If any of your listeners have got very young children, they're perfect examples of profilers. Every last one of them has the skills. So if you're worried about me being able to read you, your kids are reading every day. And the question for all your listeners, young children, how often do they push you to the edge, but they don't push you over the edge? They know exactly how to read you to get what they want. And the only reason they get into trouble at times is because they may not have realized you're already a little bit cranky to start with, and they're just taking that little bit too far. But every child is a perfect profiler. But it's like any muscle, we don't work it, it atrophies. So we get involved in sports, hobbies, school, all these other things that take our focus away from needing to read people. And as we get older, we know our parents, we know the people who are not safe to be around. It's only the very new strangers that come up that we need to worry about. So we don't need the skill as much. So everybody is at a young age, perfect profilers. And all I do these days is teach other people how to get that skill back again.
I love that. I want to get that skill back again because it's so useful in building relationships, as you said, and it can be used for a bridge for good, which I know we'll dive into, but you had mentioned for those of us that have young kids, which to my knowledge is pretty much a majority of people that are listening, unless, there's some people just love the show and they don't have kids, or there's some that are expecting. I do know there's a few of you that are, congrats, you're about to be a dad and you're doing the work ahead of time, which is awesome to equip yourself. And if you ever want to get connected with another dad, just kind of in a mentor type program or something, again, email hello@skilldad.com or Zach@skilldad.com. We'll see what we can do. But you yourself are a dad of 3 boys and had quite the journey with them. And also now have like the trophy of being, grandpa, granddad. What do they call you?
Grandfathers, they call me Pop. There's 6 of them. Each of my boys have got 2 children each. And as you said, I raised my boys when their mother left. They were 4, 11, and 12. And to me, that was a new eye-opener. That was learning a new skill. So my father died when I was 3, so I didn't really have a male role model. I didn't really have any skills in raising children. And so this was a new experience for me. But it's one of the most rewarding things. Like my first wife wanted to go and find herself. I gave her the sports car so she could get there faster. And I kept the boys. And they stayed with me. And they're the reason I stayed sane. Because so many fathers who have been separated from their children lose that connection and get lost in their, just trying to survive and feel better about themselves, that loss they've got around their kids. Well, I was lucky I didn't go through that. Boys drove me crazy. As I was growing up, falling out of trees, taking them to hospital and all sorts of things. One redeeming thing was that I knew that by the time they got to a certain age, they'd no longer be my problem. They'd be some other man's problem because they'd be after that man's daughter.
And I'm sure you were absolutely right too.
Oh, yeah.
What age did that start? Just so I can prepare myself. I'm not quite there yet.
Oh, it was my youngest, the second oldest that started first. He was about 15 when he started looking for girls. And by the time he was 16, he was very serious about it.
And didn't take him too long there. Well,
He started by chasing one of my best friend's daughters. So that was an interesting impact on our relationship.
I'm sure. Well, I know I've spent some time introducing you, and there's so many interesting things that honestly, when we first talked, I had kind of done a preliminary walkthrough. And then as I dug deeper and saw all the things that you've been able to accomplish and do, I was just really impressed and grateful that you would have interest in joining me on here. And so I'd really love to just cast the torch over to you and hear a little bit more about your story, wherever you'd like to start that, and we'll kind of take it from there. And I'll ask some questions along the way as I normally do.
Excellent. Well, as you mentioned, to come along and spend time with you, for me, that's a privilege. Because you're doing work with dads and trying to help the dads out there. That's commendable, and we need more people doing just that. See, in my case, as I said, I grew up, my father died when I was 3. I grew up without any role models. I spent most of my time on my own. I got bullied all the way through school. And the first 50 years of my life, I'd been chasing relationships to try and have something better for me. After my second divorce, first divorce, I'd raised my boys on my own, my second divorce. And that was when I realized I needed to make some changes in the way I was doing things. And that's when my journey changed. The Campfire Project came about for 2 reasons. One, because I knew the power of sitting around a campfire with other men and having conversations. When it's more a situation of getting into deeper conversations than you're able to get into in a pub. If you go to a pub or a club, you're drinking beer and there's usually a lot of stupid talk going on. But when you're out in the bush, you're sitting around a fire and you've got the flies flickering away and you get drawn into it, you start to have more serious conversations, more respectful conversations, etc. And that was something that happened to me when I turned 50. I was a massage therapist for a while, and I gave that up after my second wife left because she taught me to be the massage therapist in the first place. But a few years later, I had a couple of friends talk me into giving them a massage, and that led on to them finally opening my rooms again and having terminally ill patients coming to me. And some of them revert conditions, which for me was quite bizarre because I took them through an NLP process, talked about their life, what was going on, etc., put them on the table, the massage table, massaged them, aromatherapy oils, color therapy, sound therapies, etc. So they had an hour on the table to anchor what we'd been discussing, and it was turning a lot of their lives around. That was tough for me, and I needed some answers. Luckily, I met an Aboriginal group, and I was invited out bush on a regular basis to find out all about their culture and to learn from them. That's when my spiritual journey started. At the same time, with the profiling side that I started in the early 2000s, with the face profiling, I realized that needing to get better connections with people, I needed to actually talk to a lot of men in business as well. Because when I asked men in business, give me a word that describes your home life and a word that describes your business life. And the 2 words that kept coming back on a regular basis was, first of all, confused, and secondly, frustrated. And when I asked the men, your home life, well, tell me why confused? They said, well, we thought our job was to go out and bring the resources in. So we are absent from our family, and this is how we show love to the family, by doing that. And then we're told that we're physically and emotionally absent. So we come home, spend more time at home, and then we haven't got the resources, so we've got to go back out again. So the frustration of not knowing where to be, we can't be in 2 places at once. With political correctness and all of the gender equality, the men wanted to do the right thing, but as they said, what you can say today, you won't be able to say tomorrow. The goalposts keep getting moved, and it was causing frustration. Both of those situations led to bullying in the workplace and even domestic violence at home. Because when you're pushed up against the wall and you cannot find a direction to move in, what's left for you is to act out. And that's what was happening on a lot of occasions. Or divorces straight away. This is why our divorce rates went up as well. And so I realized that men needed a safe place to tell their story, not to be judged, not to be counseled, not to be told they were right or wrong, but just listen to them so they knew that somebody at least was listening. So I created the Campfire Project for the men. I had women in the thing from day one because I thought that if I got the men to talk first, they would talk. If I got the women to talk first, then the men wouldn't. But I wanted the women to hear how men could speak when the men started speaking. And so men would come in, tell their stories of what they've been through. And I was interviewing people in America, in Canada, in England, New Zealand, Australia. And then I'd bring them into panel discussions, and we talked about things like masculinity, femininity, drugs, alcohol, even masturbation, any subject that we could think of, we talked about. And that was when the women started sending me personal messages. I've been praying for it. And they were saying, we love the guys. We've never heard men talk so deeply about their emotions, nor so wisely about how to improve society. And they've said, can we get involved? And I went, great, the timing's now right. Because they had an opportunity to hear how these men could speak and then realize there's a different aspect to men than they actually had a view of. And so brought them into the one-on-ones, into the panel discussions. We've talked about menstruation, menopause, does size matter in the bedroom? We've got a full complement of the different gender identities, the different cultures, different religions. In 6 years and over 600 hours of conversation, we've never had any bigotry, sexism, or racism, and not once has anybody been disrespectful to anybody else. You know, you have to answer 2 questions when you come in. The 2 questions are the same question but rephrased, and the question is, will you respect everybody? And when people said, why did you ask the same question twice? I just told everybody, there's your 2 chances, you don't get a third. So people knew no grayscale, everything's black and white. It was zero tolerance to any abuse or anything like that. And because of that, we've had no problems with anybody all the way through. And the way the men and the women talk about each other, even when they can't hear each other, is amazing. The respect they all have for each other. In a lot of cases, we've had a lot of people actually create joint ventures together, because a lot of the people who come in are coaches. A lot of them are running their own groups, men's groups, women's groups, community groups. Them coming in and telling their stories, they get credibility. We even promote the coaches and others. If they've got a project they're running or someone's written a book, we will promote that once they've told their story. If they're running a group, we will promote their groups to the world, because our whole idea is to bring them together, which is why it was under the hashtag We Together. We don't solve problems when we're looking at each other and pointing fingers. We solve problems when we come shoulder to shoulder, looking at the issues and working together on them. So the Campfire Project has done that now for 6 years. It's been up for national awards with excellence in diversity and inclusion. The people in the groups have been getting awards left, right, and centre. I've been up for Man of Australia, Man of Influence for Australia, a whole bunch of other awards that have come through. But the only reason that has happened is because of the connection I've had with people and the relationships that we've created together. So it's everybody who comes in. So that's for everybody who's listening to this, by the way, you all have a story. You're all uniquely different to everybody else on the planet. You're not like all this psychometric profiling where we put people in boxes. I take you out, treat you as an individual so that you can see that you are completely different to everybody else on the planet, different experiences, different stories. Therefore, every story has a value, and you have a value. You may not think you have, but you have. You don't have to do a lot of great things. If you're a dad and you're looking after your family, that's one of the biggest things you can do in life. And I commend everyone for it.
It's the best title that you're going to have. And if you're not ready for the promotion, too late. Kid's here. Now we got to go earn it. So that's why we're here. No, I love what you had told me a little bit of that when we talked initially. I think it's really interesting that, you know, when you give people the space to actually just come under the same expectation. I like that you say you set the same expectation with everyone walking through the door. So they know before they come in, like, you know, if I bust it, then I'm going to be out. But it was set up front. So expectations that are set can often be expectations that are met. And so when people get around and they listen, what a novel trait for us to look at. When they listen and don't interrupt and want to tell part of their thing, what that can do for kind of the relationship connection that then removes a lot of the other components that you had said have not come up. And so I just think I commend you for starting it and then for growing it and building it in a way that, you know, is positively helping people. And then each of those people, I'm not there. I'm not, you know, I haven't been in there to experience it yet. But based on what you've heard, I mean, if someone goes through this type of experience and learns these skills, because it could be a new skill for somebody to learn to be able to sit there and now they've got that experience, then they can actually go out and demonstrate that outside of the campfire, right?
That's it. Yeah, the Campfire Project. We've got the Business of Smiles with the charity that been started through that. I'm a typical male as well. I have a problem presented to me. I want to go and fix it. That's just the way we're wired.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, I need to listen to understand before I can really fix something. So it was a real test for me to be able to sit there and listen. But I've gotten so used to it now. It's like, well, I always say to people, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. And when you're using your mouth, ask every possible question you can, and then ask one more. When people say, if I've asked every possible question I can, how is there another question? Very simply, from what you've been telling me, this is what I understand. Have I got it right? If you have, that person knows you've been listening to them. You've already got that rapport, then strong rapport with them. If they say no, that can even be better because now you get into a deeper conversation to go deeper into it. And they really know that you're keen then to be supportive and want to know more about it. And the rapport that you get out of that can be a lifelong friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Where it all comes down to listen to understand, don't listen to respond.
Guys, if you're like me, we need to remember that as soon as this podcast is done, you walk into your home kitchen. That's a good one. No, I think it's always, even if we know it, it's like when you hear it and you're hit with it, you're like, yes. And it's a great reminder. So we can go and then act on it.
Beat yourself up if you don't get it right every time because we're human beings, we're emotional.
Yeah.
We have been told, I know, I'm a baby boomer, so I was told all the way through life, suck it up, be tough, don't show anybody your emotions or anything else. I was a bloody great student. I learnt really well. So when it came to actually showing my emotions and everything else, it was a nightmare trying to do it. When I did it really badly because it usually came up when it had built up so much I couldn't hold it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can sit down with anybody and have a conversation, regardless of what they're talking about, and be totally comfortable. And so it's somewhere between the emotional empathy that we can have and also the compassionate empathy. So we've got cognitive at first. That's the level where you need to understand somebody's in pain. Even a torturer needs that. It's like a bully needs to know that, otherwise they don't get their jolly. But then we have the emotional empathy, and women are fantastic when it comes to emotional empathy. And we see it all the time. They will take sides very quickly and join, and support the other person. They feel the other person's pain. They will sit with the other person and, wear that pain themselves. If you leave it there too long, that then becomes a problem because now your fractions and sides being taken. So men, we try and jump in and fix it without, first of all, taking a little bit of time to acknowledge the emotional empathy with the women and go, yeah, we understand what you're feeling. We can feel it ourselves. But now let's move to compassion. We've got to acknowledge their emotional empathy, first of all, before we try and fix the problem. But we just have this vision. Women only go up to here. We come off from that point, but there's no follow-up gap or connection over gaps. We take time for that little connection, and I guarantee the women's attitude and that will completely change.
So the connection in what you're saying is kind of acknowledging the emotions and the empathy.
Yeah.
And then the compassion is the bridge.
That's it.
Is that what am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, we have that. We go straight into compassion. Say, for instance, someone, a child has fallen off the swings at the park and they've broken their leg and there's bone sticking out the leg. Emotional empathy, or first of all, cognitive would be, yes, we can see the pain because the bone's sticking out. We see the crying and everything else. The emotion is we start to feel it as well. We can feel the pain that they're feeling. But if we stopped at that point and just kept feeling the pain with them, that child wants their leg fixed. So the man would grab them and take them to the hospital and get the leg fixed. But there's no connection between the emotional and the compassionate. We've gone straight into it. We need to bridge that. We need to spend that little bit of a moment. Yes, I understand the pain you're going through. I can appreciate that. It's the same as if somebody walks up to me and they're angry. I will get a punch in the face if I turn around and say to them, oh, it's okay, settle down. It's not, they're getting angry and I'm trying to see it all the time. This is where fights start because somebody doesn't want to feel their pain. We try and get them to settle down and they're going, but you haven't acknowledged my pain. But if I raise my voice to equal theirs, they now see that I'm also feeling things similar to them. Then I can change my tone of voice. I can change the way I'm standing. I can soften the approach towards them. So if I could dance, if you've got a partner, the male usually pushes the female to get her to move. That's the first part of it. And then from there it flows. So by meeting them at their level is like that push to say, rightio, I've got the connection. Then you take them where you want to take them in the way in which you treat them, the way you talk to them.
This is like empathetic judo.
Very much so.
I love it. It's because, judo is when you use the other person's energy. Okay. So against them in judo. But in this case, it's using that energy to then guide them with you in a positive way. Interesting. I really like that.
You make that little push, and then you like a dancer, and you got the woman always at the end of it loves the dance you did. Thinks that was the best dance I've had. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah.
By actually us saying to a woman who's been see their stress and everything else, and say to her, look, you want me to fix this, or do you want me to listen? Just that little one question. If they want you to fix it, either they know you have the power to fix the problem that's come up, or you screwed up in the first place, I want you to fix that. If they say, no, I just want you to listen, you know, it's got nothing to do with you. But if you care for the other person, just hold in their space and let them talk. They straight away will have a great affection and thanks for you, because you've given them something that nobody else has given them. And that is the moment to be able to share what they're feeling, be the eyes and ears without judgment, without telling them whether they're right or wrong or trying to fix it. So I will present that to a woman so that she can then ask me if she wants me to fix it or not. If I try and fix it without asking her, that's just totally disrespectful.
Right.
Not recognizing needs.
It's disrespectful, even unintentionally, if we're, if we're not trying to, because we're kind of oftentimes built to solution. That one hits home, and I'll share why. I honestly don't even remember when we started doing this. I mean, it's been at least 7 years. I think early on with our first child, and I had a tendency to always kind of be like, okay, sorry you feel that way. Like, now let's go, right? And it wasn't great. So it just morphed into this cadence that we have. And I share the story as it's a cautionary tale for anybody that wants to deploy it based on my own feelings. I want to share it with you. So both of us will, like, if I want to vent about something, and I don't necessarily want over empathy, like, I just want to be like, get it out. Or if she wants to, share about whatever's going on with her, we both have the verbiage in our family say, hey, is this a feelings discussion? Or are you looking for a solution? So like our code word is this a feelings discussion?
Brilliant.
Now this is the cautionary tale part. Over time, I caught myself when I heard feelings discussion, I was kind of like, okay, my part's not here. So I somewhat semi-checked out a little bit. So I wasn't fulfilling my part of the bargain by actually listening. I was there, but I wasn't there. And so that was something that she brought to my attention. And I'm glad, because I wasn't fully aware of that. I was fully kind of like checking out to a degree, but it really has changed a lot in that part of tension, when before it was, here, I'm going to solve your problems. Right. And she didn't want that. And sometimes I didn't want kind of the over empathy. I just wanted to like talk, just get it out. And so if exactly what you're saying, it's like, for us, is this a feelings discussion? And then we know what hat to put on, the listener hat or problem solving hat.
So asking that question up front is perfect. Then you've got to remember to follow up with it, as you just said, being in that state of mind. And it works for us guys as well. I was going to give a talk on a health forum here in Newcastle in Australia. And the guy who organised it was a mediator. And there was another person who was going to talk as well, that it annoyed the life out of it. Something the other speaker was doing that really upset him. And we were driving to an event in the car together, and he started going off about this other speaker. So I asked him, I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he went off on a tirade of anger and everything else. And at the end of it, I said, can I ask you another question? He said, what's that? I said, what are you going to do about it? Same question again, but he had now allowed him, he vented. And now in the same question again, the energy's out. He was able to think straight because he finally had somebody who heard what he was feeling. And then he just laid out a perfect plan of attack of how he was going to set things up. The event ended up going really well. And the connection he had with the other guy had been sorted. So he didn't have that problem anymore, but he needed to get out of his system. This is the one thing that a lot of men don't realize. We hold it down because that's what I was told all my life. Hold it down, keep it to yourself. Sooner or later, it's going to come out. If it doesn't come out in a violent action or an outburst or anything else, it will come out in your body. You'll start to have illnesses and other things that will come out because our physiology and neurology are linked together. So what do we feel inside? We actually exhibit outside, and it therefore affects our physical being as well. So we need to be able to get these things out. This is why I always say to men, find a man who will sit and listen and share the things that are going on in your life and not ask for support or anything else or answers or anything. If I ask for somebody for answers, it's because I believe they have the answers. If somebody says, I need help, I go, well, look, yes, if I've been through something, I can say, yes, I've been through that. This is what I found. I don't know if that'll work for you, but give it a try. If I haven't, I'll make not a statement, but a question. I was thinking that, have you tried doing this? Do you think this might work? So I'm asking them whether they believe it can work or not. I'm not telling them because most people who have never been through something will tell everybody else how they should do things because they don't want to feel that person's emotions at that time. We find that when somebody has stress at the moment, the stats are showing that before somebody jumps in, after they start telling their story, the time it takes before somebody jumps in and starts giving you advice is 19 seconds. How much information can you get in 19 seconds? Wow. Because we're all feeling more vulnerable than we've ever felt in the past. So now we don't want to feel that emotion and we want to shut it off even faster again because we're already emotional in the first place. So it takes a little bit of time. This is why finding people who want to support you, they don't have to be psychologists. They don't have to have a format they're going to take you through or anything like that. They just have to have somebody who has the skill to just use their eyes and ears. And if they use their mouth, ask questions, not give advice.
So here's a question in the spirit of questions. So for those that have listened to this podcast enough, and actually some of the things that we're talking about, it's so interesting how as we get through similar topics and things pop up in a similar way, right? Maybe wrapped a little bit differently, but I think those are the things that we should be listening to because there's some of the big rocks that are in the glass jar that's surrounded by sand. And when they come up a lot, it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should pay attention to that. But in the spirit of questions, those that are on here and have been joining for some time, I believe are some of those people that are wanting to learn the new skills that we can then use and deploy. So what are some ways for someone that's listening or for myself that we can go and learn more about what you're talking about so that we can be effective in the relationships around us and then perhaps even, help teach other people?
Well, the first thing is the more we can understand somebody else, the more we can communicate with them in the way that they need to be communicated with. Like looking at you, I know that you like the least amount of information. You can make your decision on that, and then it's just give me the best way to do it and the way you want to get into it. If I told you all the information I need to know, it's going to be too much. You're going to switch off. You're all very worked out with the best way to do it, and I'm still talking about ways you could do it. You want to get on with the job, we're not going to really connect. So if I'm able to read somebody and understand their personality, then I talk to them in the way that they need to be spoken to. That's the important thing. Always, the old thing, treat others as you would have them treat you, is fine when it comes to respect. But with communication is treat others as they would have you treat and speak to them. So it's always about the other person. So the more that you can understand the other person and connect with them, the better things are going to go. Now, that's easy enough for me to say that, and the people listening might be saying, well, how do I learn some of that? What I'll give you at the end of this as well is a free course that I've got you can share with your listeners. They can try it for themselves and see how well it works. Because just in the fact of having done the course and going out and attempting to apply it, even if they don't do it right, they're going to get a different response from the people around them. And the people around them are going to start wondering, well, what's going on here? And funny enough, that usually starts conversations. So you never know how much you get out of it. I could teach somebody out of all the 68 traits that I use, one trait. They go out and apply that, and people go, what's going on here? The conversation starts from that. So this is where things flow.
I look forward to diving into
that
that.
overnight.
To that point, knowledge, like if we go do the course, knowledge is great. Knowledge without action is just good at trivia. And I found myself saying that a little bit more lately. But knowledge with action and then repeat is where we're going to learn those skill sets. So if you're curious and you're wanting to learn more, and by the way, it's not just with our wives or with our kids. If you're in business, if you work with people, and if you want to be a good listener to your friends, you know, what somebody, I'm sure I've read it. I had this conversation quite a bit, but we used to teach some of our salespeople on this. Sometimes the people that are considered the best conversationalists say the least amount of words in the conversation.
The only time you find me talking is when I'm in an interview. The rest of the time, I'm listening. Because when you ask questions about somebody else, they're talking about their favorite subject, them. If you're talking about you, who really cares? So that's why I'll always make that approach. Ask the questions, show interest in what they're doing, what's around them, etc. And they'll always walk away and turn around and say, that was the best conversation I had. And I think, how many words? Well, when I interviewed people when they first came in, I'd put them at rest when they realized they know my skills. But I put them at rest and they understood that I was doing this to connect with them and to help them. They started to relax. When they knew that I'm not using the what I call the truth seeker side, where some people might call it lie detection, I like to find the truth in things. So they know I'm using those micro expression skills, the body language, etc., to pick up what's emotionally going on, that tell me, are they telling the truth or not? Not to find an error with them, but to understand, well, if they're not telling the truth, what is it they're not telling? What can I do to help them to uncover that? Because we're talking about emotion. So they know I'm not trying to look down at them. I'm trying to work with them and help them. So 5 minutes into the conversation, when before that they've said, I don't know what I'm going to say. I've never really spoken to my psychologist, my psychiatrist, my family, my friend, colleagues. There's no one I've been able to talk to. And 5 minutes into it, they start talking, and I'm lucky to get a word in edgewise for the next 45 minutes, which is fine. While they're talking, their conscious mind's connecting with their unconscious mind. And at the end of it, they go, my God, that's the best therapy I've ever had. And I go, well, if you want to thank the therapist, get off the call, go look in the mirror and say thank you to yourself. Because your unconscious mind's been screaming at you all this time, but you finally now listen to it. Your conscious mind's been caught up in all this ego and all this logical stuff, but it hasn't really felt the emotions because you didn't want to feel the emotions. But now your unconscious mind's talking to you, and you realize that things aren't as bad as they were. There are now solutions, because once you get rid of the emotions, you can start to think more clearly. And you can start to get positive emotions. When you've got positive emotions, you've got positive thoughts. It's a process.
So after people have gone through and experienced this, what have you seen on the other side?
I've seen fathers really connecting with their sons and their daughters. I've seen even couples who have been separated. The funniest one was I had a young boy that I'd profiled in for his parents. They were separated. When I profiled the child, they sent me photographs through, and I put an audio report together, sent it to both of them. They had a chance to listen to it. When they came on Zoom, they were both in the car, but they're in their own separate cars, having a conversation with me. And what I'm doing, I look at both parents, and while I'm talking about how they need to talk to that child in exactly the same way, each of them have to change differently to be able to do that. And while I'm doing that, I could see them looking at the other side of the screen where they could see their ex-partner sitting, realizing that I'm saying, well, this is how you can connect with each other. And a lot of them have actually built better relationships with their ex. They've been able to then move to a level where they could co-parent. A lot of the talk I do with people in that situation is also pointing out to anybody who is separated from their partner, and he's complaining about their ex-partner, and their kids are hearing it. Yes, they might be rubbishing their ex-partner, but I show them how at the same time they are actually ruining the relationship they have with their children as well, because they're telling them half of them is no good because half the DNA came from their partner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, over a period of time, they will eventually resent them. It may not happen overnight. It may be 10, 20, 30 years later, but it will happen at some point. One of the things I realized, if my sons were going to find good partners, they needed to have some guidance. They needed to respect their mother. So I had to learn to put my stuff aside and go and build a relationship with her. And to do that made it easier for me to think about, well, instead of thinking about the negative side, what was a positive side of our union in that marriage? 3 sons that I love and respect.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when they were young. That was before we had grandkids. That was enough for me to realize that my 3 sons would repeat my history if they didn't respect their mother. They didn't have that guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, yes, my mother raised me, but no male role models around me. And I virtually left home not really being very close to my mother at all.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things over time have reminded me that, yes, little bits and pieces that came along. As you said before, knowledge, we can read all the books in the world. There are books left. I've got about 36 meters of shelving with books on it. And all of that is knowledge. But unless I read it, even if I read the whole lot, but don't apply it, it's still just knowledge. By applying it and experience, I get the experience back from that, and the application of it and the experience then becomes wisdom. I'm hoping that I've gained a lot of wisdom over the years. Well, I know I've got to create a hell of a lot more than I had when I first separated from my first wife and even after my second wife.
Mm-hmm.
My target is to help others.
So you had mentioned earlier, and I think it's a really interesting piece, and we didn't talk a whole lot about it when we originally talked, and we touched on it. When your wife had left and you had your 3 boys, you also mentioned your experience in joining the Aboriginal tribes, and you went through a rite of passage with them, correct?
Yeah.
Would you be open to share just some high points in that experience and what that had meant for you? Because rites of passage is a topic that deserves much more time than we have available for the remainder of this podcast, but is an important thing in my book. And I'm just, from a firsthand experience, I would be fascinated to know, and any takeaways that maybe we should glean that could be applied as we raise our boys and our girls.
There are a few things that I can explain as far as the rite of passage itself. This is like the rite of passage. What it comes down to is you learn things, and when you get to a certain level, then you can go to the next level. And that's what a rite of passage is. None of the women know what the men go through. None of the boys know what the men have gone through because the boys haven't been through it yet. They have to have that pure and be able to step into it and experience it for themselves with no prior knowledge of what's going to happen, so that they get the full benefit from it. It becomes something they're really proud of having. If I sit down with the other men, we never need to talk about it either. We just look at each other and just a knowing in each other's eyes. So we experience it all again without saying a single word. But the 3 main pillars of the Aboriginal community is love, humility, and respect. Now, respect for each other, the humility, yes, we can be proud of the things that we do and everything else, but there's not that arrogance with it. There's a humility level with it. But love is love for mother, was love for the planet. But that also for me meant every mother. That every woman has the potential of being a mother. And so therefore every woman needs to be treated that way, including every little girl, with respect. Because the girl will always look at her father as being the first person that the man they really know. What he turns out to be will impact the type of man that she will find. If he's really sets the bar high, thank God if he does, because he really sets the bar high for the boys that she's going to meet. They have to come up to a certain standard. If the father is not the nicest person in the planet, she's going to measure all men by that. And therefore, more likely to go, well, this is all that's left. That's all I've got to look forward to. And you have problems that come from that. At the same time, the boy is dad is the boy's first hero. They will always look up to it. One thing I realized, so when my youngest boy followed me through in my rite of passage, he followed about a year or so behind me, he was 16 at the time. the end result was that I knew my job wasn't to turn him into a man. My job was to get him ready for it.
Mm.
The other men in the tribe who had that responsibility, because I remember when I took him out there, one of the elders said to me, "What do you want us to do?" I said, "Well, my job was to get him here. Your job is to turn him into a man, take him through that process. Because what he'll do is look at each man, look at a little bit from each of them, take a little bit from each for himself, create an identity which is completely different to everybody else. So he's totally unique and therefore values him straight away." The elder said to me, "Well, what's your job?" I looked at him and I said, "Well, you've got sons." A big smile on their face. They went, "You got it." See,
Mm.
my dad died when I was 3. He was 4. I thought he was 49 when he died. I found out many years later, he was actually 51. But on my 50th birthday, I remembered I put the knife in the cake and I started to cake the cake. And as I came down, I froze. And I remember the people around me staring at me because what went through my mind, I am now 50. My dad was 49. I'd listened to all the stories that they'd said about him and I'd lived up to that. Now, all of a sudden, I'm older than him. How can I follow him anymore? Who do I follow?
Mm.
It was terrifying. I froze. And that's one of
Mm.
the reasons I realized that we need other good men around it. And if a mother and father are separated and the boys or the children are with the mother still needs to have men around. She doesn't have to be in a relationship with them, but she needs to attract good men because those men will then be those role models for both their daughters and their sons.
Mm-hmm.
When they say that it takes a tribe to raise a village to raise a child, it's exactly true, 100%. Because if I had turned my sons into men, they would be my clones. And that's what I was for the first 50 years of my life. I was my father's clone. And then all of a sudden I'm going, how do I clone myself now?
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized I've got 3 sons. And I jokingly talk about chalk and cheese and still trying to figure out number 3, even though he's in his 30s. So, I'm proud of all my boys. They've got partners, they've got children. They've turned into really decent men. They may not have the greatest jobs in the world and things like that. My youngest one, wife is schizophrenic and he's got 2 autistic sons. He's full-time carer. He's got his work cut out for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at him, it's absolute admiration of what he's actually achieved. And thank God he didn't grow up the same as me. I'm really thankful of that because he's his own man and therefore one I can respect.
Mm.
We can be proud of your children and what they grow into. We're not carpenters. We're not sculptors. Our job is not to turn them into something. We are gardeners. Our job is to nurture them to become the best version of themselves. And if you're not getting on with your partner and you've got that angst and that going on, step up to him and say, "Look," she said, "he doesn't respect me and doesn't love me." She said, "Like the older 2. I said, "Right, you're semi-right. They don't respect you, but they all love you because you're their mum. But they don't respect you." And I said, "You will never get that respect because you've lost it. It's a man's job." And I said, "I'm the one with the biggest problem with you. As long as you know I'm going to do this for them and not for you, I will step in. I will make sure that they respect you. You'll know that they love you," and they still do. They're in their, the older children in their late 40s. And I said, "They will, your job once you've got that respect is then to keep that respect. If you lose it, then you're going to have to find a way to go back because I'm not doing it again. I'm doing it once." And so she ended up with 3 sons that loved and respected her. And that was my job as a male. So if I hadn't done that and I just got caught up on the crap that she told me I wasn't good enough and all that anger from that, I would have robbed my sons of their future. Not going to happen. So it's just a decision, like the click of the fingers. You make a decision and that's how quickly you can change the attitude with your partner and even tell them that's what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Explain to them why you're going to change your behavior with them. And they let them know that it's because of the kid, not because of them. But if you tell them it's because of them, they're not going to believe you. If you tell them it's because of the kids, which is when you're separated, then you've got a better chance of that working.
As you're talking through, it's amazing. Just every now and then I get like punched in the face with aha moments, even through all these conversations. Sometimes they're just good reminders. And as you're talking to your ex-wife at the time, saying that you'll step in and you're going to set the tone, like you're setting the tone that they're going to follow. And then you saw that result, but it's not about us as dads. It's about the kids.
That's it.
You talked about the providing thing, right? confusion, frustration.
Hmm.
It's not about us. It's about providing. Then we have to understand like what providing means, both emotionally and tangibly. So there's all these things, but there's a common thread here, which is once we get that great promotion, and I contend it's the best promotion you're ever going to have, and you're going to have it your entire life, is being dad. And once that comes, it's not about us.
That's it. So with all the things that you mentioned, when you think there's so much there for any man who doesn't think that they have value, well, think about all those things you're going to be doing there. You too have a definite value.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a lot of men out there who use the term they're ashamed of, things they've done in the past. I would challenge every one of them. There's a very small percentage of the population that should feel shame. Everybody else might have regret, but they don't have right to feel shame. You will find that if you did the best you could with the information you had, you might look at it now and say, I got more information. Yes, I would have done it differently. But if you did the best you could at that time, yes, you can regret that you didn't get a different result, but you have no right to be ashamed of yourself because you did the best you could. This is one of the things. There's a lot of men out there who are killing themselves at the moment, emotionally as well, with the fact that they don't think they're good enough, that they failed. You've only worked with the information you had. Get some new information and make new decisions, and let any shame that you have go, because you can't get rid of that shame because it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, we've given ourselves that term so many times, and that's what's killing so many men. Here in Australia, we lose 9 people a day commit suicide, 7 of them are men. And we're only a population of 27 million.
Mm.
The number of men in America and England and other places that are committing suicide be even higher again. And a lot of it is because of this rubbish we've been taught, and about feeling shame and everything else, that we're not good enough. Well, it's not a matter of whether you're good enough. It's how you actually behave that depends on the value you give. And that is a matter of a decision to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy done easily when you start looking at things that way. You don't need to go and see a psychologist for 2 years to try and get results. By just changing the way in which you're looking at things and reevaluating in a different way, you realize that, my God, I had been up against a lot. I've really achieved really well within that period of time. But now I've got some new skills that I can actually step forward, and this is what I can do now.
Yeah.
The invitation's there for yourself. I'd love to have you come into the Campfire Project, have a look around, tell your story, but also love your listeners to come and join us there as well. Because what we're trying to do is connect all the groups around the world, not being over the top of anybody, but all being connected together, so that we have that global web of connection. And we go and talk to people and find out all the similarities that we all have around the world, but then have those conversations where we can understand and appreciate the differences that we have as well.
Mm. And that will create a society that we should have.
That's it.
Through relationships and understanding and a lot more beneficial help, so that we can have the community and the men around to help. I love what you said. And then I want to make sure that we can guide people to where to find you and learn more. But I love what you said. And I've not thought about this. My job was not to turn him into a man. It was to get him ready for it.
That's it. Guide them to the point. Remember, you're a gardener. You're not a sculptor. You're not a carpenter. You don't have to create something. You nurture them so they become the best version that they can be. And that's both your sons and your daughters.
Mm. I love that.
And they will love you for it.
Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, the best way, if they want to find the Campfire Project, it's just one word, thecampfireproject.com.au for Australia. And if they want to find me and what I do, Alan Stevens, and that's ALAN, and Stevens, STEVENS.com.au. They're the 2 websites.
Perfect. And I'll include those in the show notes and everything as well. But Alan always zooms by, and there's so much more we could dive into. But I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here and sharing just even a snippet of what you learned and helping equip us so that we've got knowledge. Now it's up to us to take some action and start learning from it. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Maybe we'll do it again sometime. And hopefully I'll see you in the campfire. Awesome. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye for now.
Well, guys and gals, if you've made it this far in the podcast, I know that you've had some takeaways. And I love some of the analogies that Alan had used to even help bridge that gap. But what a great reminder, or if you've not heard it for the first time, some of the actual actionable takeaways that we can go and start deploying like immediately. Like you should probably just pause it right now if you're in your kitchen doing the dishes, and then start talking to your wife or partner about what they've got going on, and then just listen and actually be engaged. So that's a great reminder. And then the other thing, when we talk about being a gardener, tending the garden, you've got it. It's been planted. It's growing. We need to water it. We need to give it the right food, make sure it's got the right sunlight, and then pull those weeds. But that's a good question. Are you tending the garden that you've got? If your immediate answer is no, what are some things you can do? It's not about necessarily what we did or haven't done. It's about recognizing that. And now we say, okay, cool. What are we going to go do? So we can think forward and say what we've learned and then go apply it. If we really take what we've learned and then apply it and go do it, that's where we're going to start seeing some fruit. So I love having the opportunity to meet people like Alan. I'm so appreciative of him being on here. And I love that you can join in the conversation and take some of these things with you. And I'd love to hear what you've heard. The main thing I ask is if you've thought of somebody in this conversation that's not listening on the same earbud as you, share it with them, because that's an investment that you can make in them because you thought of them specifically. They're going to feel a connection to that you actually care about them, and then they can benefit from it as well. But until then, I hope you can take these things and apply them on your life and your journey to becoming the skilled dad.